Welcome back to Process Cast with Mark Anderson and Samantha Blake, your go-to podcast for insights into business process management and the technologies transforming the way we work. In this episode, Samantha and Mark dive into a business process you can import into your HEFLO account for free. Click the link in the description to get it.
Okay, so have you ever been working on something and it's just not going the way it's supposed to?
Oh, yeah.
It could be anything. A recipe, you follow it exactly and it just doesn't turn out. Or maybe a tech issue.
Sure. Yeah.
Your computer just starts doing weird things. Or even, at work when a project hits a roadblock.
Mm-hmm.
Today we're going to be looking at a super organized way to handle these situations, when things just go off the rails.
Absolutely. And we've got this really interesting document that basically outlines a whole process for dealing with these deviations from the norm. And think of it like a guidebook, not just to get back on track, but also to figure out what went wrong in the first place so you can try to avoid those same problems later on.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we kind of just brush those things under the rug and we're like, oh, whatever, I'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. But this is about being systematic.
Right.
About it so you can learn and improve.
So our mission today is to break down this whole system so you can see how to spot these problems, deal with them, and most importantly, learn from them so you can make things better next time.
I like that mission.
All right, so first things first, you got to notice when something's off, right?
Right.
And the document calls this the detect and report the nonconformity stage, which basically means recognizing when something isn't meeting the standards or specifications.
Yeah. And it's not just about someone having a hunch or a gut feeling.
Right.
It's about having systems in place to catch those issues.
What kind of systems are we talking about here?
Well, they mentioned routine quality checks, formal audits, and even feedback from customers.
Oh, interesting. So it could come from anywhere.
Yeah, it's about having a wide net so nothing slips through the cracks.
I like that, a wide net.
Yeah. And another thing they highlight is the role of the auditor. It's like they're a detective looking specifically for anything that deviates from the established norms.
Okay, so they're really focused on finding those inconsistencies.
Exactly. And once they find something, it's all about reporting it formally. Not just a casual heads up, but an official record.
So there's a whole process for this reporting.
Oh, yeah. They lay out exactly how it should be done.
What do they say?
So they talk about using established systems like online forms, logbooks, or even dedicated software for tracking these nonconformities.
Okay, so a consistent method for capturing all this information.
Right. And the document also stresses the importance of including all the essential details.
What kind of details?
Well, you got to have a clear description of the problem, the location or batch number, the date and time, and of course, who found it.
Got it. So it's like painting a very precise picture of the situation.
Yeah, exactly.
And why is all this so important?
Well, this initial stage of detection and reporting is like the foundation of the whole process. If you don't have accurate and complete information, everything that comes after is going to be shaky.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So by documenting everything right from the start, you're setting yourself up for success later on.
Okay, so we've spotted the issue and reported it. What happens next?
So then we move into the evaluate nonconformity and plan treatment actions phase. And this is where the quality manager comes in.
And what do they do?
They really dig deep to understand the potential consequences of the issue.
So they're not just looking at the surface level, they're trying to figure out the ripple effects.
Precisely. They got to assess how serious the nonconformity is and what could happen if it's not dealt with properly.
Okay, so they're asking how big of a deal is this really?
Yeah. And the document lays out a few key areas they consider.
Like what?
Well, first, they look at the impact on the quality of the product or service.
Right.
Then they consider if there are any implications for regulatory compliance.
Okay. Making sure everything's still on the up and up.
Exactly. And then they figure out if it's an isolated incident or if it's part of a bigger systemic issue.
That's a good point, because if it's happening all over the place, that's obviously a bigger problem.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And they prioritize these nonconformities based on potential risks, is it a safety concern or could it cause delays?
So they're kind of figuring out which fires to put out first?
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay, so they've evaluated the issue and now it's time to develop a plan of action, right?
Exactly. And they call this the corrective action plan.
And what does that involve?
It outlines specific steps to address the issue and, more importantly, to prevent it from happening again.
So it's not just a quick fix, it's about finding a long-term solution.
Right.
Are there examples in the document of what these corrective actions could be?
Oh, yeah, they mention things like changing the production process, updating product specifications, training employees, or even investigating suppliers.
Wow. So it could be a pretty wide range of actions.
It all depends on the nature of the issue.
Okay, so we've identified the problem, we've assessed its impact, and we've got a plan. Now it's time to put that plan into action, right?
Yeah, and this is the perform corrective action stage where the operational staff take over.
So they're the ones who actually implement the plan.
Exactly. They take those specific steps outlined in the corrective action plan.
And what kind of things might they be doing?
Well, it could involve things like physically modifying defective products, adjusting procedures, updating checklists, providing additional training, or even collaborating with suppliers to resolve the issue.
So it's about getting everyone on board and making the necessary changes.
And the document really emphasizes that the goal here is to not just fix the immediate problem, but to address the underlying cause.
So you're not just putting a Band-Aid on it, you're actually trying to prevent it from happening again.
Exactly. If you only address the symptoms, the problem's likely to resurface.
Right, so it's like treating the disease, not just the symptoms.
Exactly.
Okay, so running through all of this is the need to document everything, right?
Oh, yeah. Documentation is key.
And who's in charge of that?
Primarily the quality manager.
So they're like the record keepers for this whole process.
Yeah, they make sure everything is documented meticulously.
And why is that so important?
Well, first of all, it creates a traceable record, which is super helpful for future reference if similar issues pop up.
Right, so you can kind of look back and see what worked, what didn't work.
Exactly. And it's also often a requirement for regulatory compliance and audits.
So you got to have your ducks in a row.
Yep, and the document's pretty specific about what needs to be recorded.
Like what?
For the initial nonconformity, you need a detailed description of the issue, the date it was found, the severity assessment, the findings of the root cause analysis, and any immediate actions taken.
Wow, so that's a pretty thorough record.
It is. And then for the corrective actions themselves, you got to document what actions were implemented, who was responsible, any adjustments made, and how the effectiveness of those actions was verified.
So it's like creating a complete history of the issue from start to finish.
Exactly.
Okay, so once everything's documented, where do we go from there?
Well, the next stage is validate nonconformity report and actions. And this is where the quality management system, or QMS, takes the lead.
What does the QMS do?
They're like the quality control for the whole process. They review everything to make sure it's complete, accurate, and effective.
So they're the ones who give the final stamp of approval.
Yeah, you could say that.
And what are they looking for specifically?
Well, they check if all the necessary details are in the initial report.
Right.
They make sure the root cause analysis was thorough and that the severity assessment makes sense.
So they're really scrutinizing everything.
Oh, yeah. And they also check if the corrective actions addressed both the immediate problem and the root cause.
So it's not just about fixing it in the moment, it's about making sure it doesn't happen again.
Precisely.
And then based on this review, what happens?
They either approve the report and the actions, or they request revisions or additional corrective measures.
Okay, so they're the final gatekeepers.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
All right, so we're getting close to the end here. What's the next step?
Well, once the report and actions are validated, it's time to communicate everything.
Makes sense. You got to keep everyone in the loop.
Exactly. And this stage is called Communicate Corrective Actions and Improvements, and it's also managed by the QMS.
And who needs to be informed about this?
Well, it could be internal teams, external partners like suppliers or regulators, and even the employees who are directly affected by any changes.
So it's about sharing this knowledge with everyone who needs to know.
Right. And this communication can take different forms, from brief summaries to more detailed explanations.
So it could be a quick email or a full-blown presentation.
Exactly. And it might even involve updating guidelines or providing additional training.
So it's about making sure everyone is on the same page and understands the changes that were made.
Right. And the document stresses the importance of using different methods to communicate this information, like announcements, updated procedures, or even dedicated training sessions.
Okay, so it's about finding the best way to reach everyone.
Yeah. And what I find really valuable about this stage is the emphasis on organizational learning.
Right. So it's not just about resolving this one issue. It's about sharing that knowledge so everyone can benefit.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're at the final stage now, right?
This is where we close the nonconformity case.
And who handles this?
The QMS again.
So they're there from beginning to end.
They are.
And what does closing the case actually involve?
It's the formal conclusion of the whole process once everything's been implemented, documented, and communicated.
So it's like tying up all the loose ends.
Precisely. And the document lists a few key actions for this stage.
Like what?
A final verification that everything was done as planned, obtaining approval to officially close the case, updating the records in the tracking system, and then archiving all the documentation.
Wow, so it's a very thorough process.
It is, and it's all about establishing a clear record that the issue has been resolved.
So everyone can move on knowing it's been dealt with.
Exactly.
Now, we've talked about a lot of different roles today, so let's do a quick recap.
Right.
First, we have the auditor who finds and reports the nonconformities.
Right.
Then there's the quality manager who evaluates the issue and develops the corrective action plan. The operational staff implement those actions, and the quality management system oversees everything.
That's right.
And it's important to remember that these aren't just isolated roles, it's a team effort.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone has to work together to ensure quality.
So to sum it all up, what we've explored today is a very structured and systematic way to deal with those times when things don't go as planned.
Yeah, it's about more than just fixing problems. It's about learning from them and preventing them in the future.
Exactly. And the key takeaways here are the importance of early detection, understanding the root cause planning, carefully documenting everything, verifying that everything was done correctly, communicating clearly, and then formally closing the case.
And having well-defined processes and clear roles and responsibilities is essential.
Right. So it's not just about winging, it's about having a solid system in place.
Absolutely.
So here's something to think about. Have you ever had a situation where things didn't go as planned and you wish you had a more structured way to handle it?
Oh, yeah.
Like maybe you tried to fix it quickly, but the problem kept coming back. Or maybe you didn't really get to the root cause of the issue.
It happens.
So what if instead of seeing these deviations as failures, we saw them as opportunities to learn and improve?
That's a great way to look at it.
Right, because even when things go wrong, there's always something valuable to be learned.
Absolutely. And by applying a structured approach, like the one we discussed today, we can turn those bumps in the road into stepping stones for progress.
I like that, stepping stones for progress.
And who knows, maybe we can even prevent some of those bumps from happening in the first place.
No, that would be a real win.
It would.
Thank you for listening to ProcessCast. This episode was brought to you by HEFLO, the BPM platform that empowers businesses to document, automate, and optimize their processes with AI. Experience the intelligence to simplify complex business processes and accelerate your growth with our complete management solution. Visit heflo.com to learn more. Be sure to follow ProcessCast for more insights on business process management, and don't forget to share this episode with your network. Until next time.